Hey everybody, so before we get down to the lore, video, and review stuff, I just wanted to take time to do some quick housekeeping before we get right down into it. You may be wondering why this was uploaded on Sunday, or at least it should be uploaded on Sunday, instead of the usual Saturday, the day after the story drops, especially because this one was released a little bit earlier. And it's mainly because I don't think I'm happy doing these reviews the very night the stories come out, because it implies that I have to get home from work, read the story, analyze them, record it, edit it, and then pump it out within like 4 or 5 hours before I have to go to sleep that night. And I didn't like that. It was kind of like not as good. I didn't get enough time to fully flesh out my ideas when it came to the specific literary elements of the short stories, and it ended up just sounding like me rambling on for 20 minutes. I didn't really like that. So as you can see, I'm going to take another day, basically another night of just editing and making it look pretty and just forming my thoughts a little bit more, and then I'll release the videos probably 2 days afterwards. I believe this is the only way that I can actually go and do a video per episode and still have it meet the quality that I'm happy with. So the Wednesday story reviews will be going up on Friday morning, or Friday around noontime, and the Friday storylines will be going up around Sunday morning, Sunday noontime, depending on how quickly I can get those done. And I think that's just how we're going to go from now on. As long as I stick to the plan and the stories are fun, it should be fine. Along with this change in scheduling, I'm going to make these a little more structured, whereas if I'm not just jumping from one topic to another randomly in no specific order, I'm going to start usually every episode with housekeeping if I need to. I will move on to a quick synopsis of the story in case everybody needs a refresher or somebody hasn't read the story out. And then I'll move on to the proper literary analysis and review, and then closing off with final thoughts or my ideas or topics as to what I feel the story's going to do moving forward. So, with that other question, let's just start with a quick synopsis. So Zareth and Akiri are basically starting the job they were talking about at the end of the previous part, where they are guiding this merfolk caravan of traders down the Magosi portage, which I believe it is a river below sea level with crashing waterfalls that flow through it. And along the way, they run into some trouble, mainly just trying to keep everybody calmed down. They are then attacked by the gigantic serpent monster called Verazal the Scourge of Umara. Zareth understands how big of a threat this is and attempts to run away or try to save them. Akiri just sees this as this big monster of Zendikar that she has to defeat in order to accomplish her job and, well, not die, so she attempts to fight it the best she can. And the story kind of like flips perspectives between Akiri and Zareth back and forth, and I'll touch upon that later because I love that. But they end up not being able to defeat it because it's just so powerful and so big, and they just don't have the skill or power to do so. So Zareth uses the merfolk caravan, or the ones that are left after the initial attack, as bait for Verazal. Verazal then takes the bait, gorges himself, as the story put it, on the merfolk caravan, and then him and Akiri run away for safety. The story then closes off with them waiting for an entire day to see if any of the merfolk come out. None of them do, so they head back to the sea gate and just avoid their final destination entirely. Really heavy, really brutal, but god did I love this story. I loved it so much. So now that the quick synopsis is done, let's move on to the actual analysis. So let's start with the two main themes that I see running across this entire short story, including the part 1, but mainly with the part 2. It is the theme of sacrifice. In this one specifically, the second one isn't that easy to put to words, but it's basically, what I've noticed is a running motif of events that kind of mimic or are similar to events that have previously happened in the story. It isn't so much foreshadowing because some of the events happen in the past and are referred to in flashbacks, but it's basically more of a time loop where events in the present mimic events in the past. And I want to touch upon the first example I saw of this, which was the death of the first ox along the trailway. At the beginning of the story, one of the oxen breaks its ankle, and they have to put it down and then move all of the cargo that ox was holding and move it to all of the other oxen. And when I first read this, it didn't really make sense, because I was kind of wondering what was going to happen in regards to this oxen falling and them killing it, and nothing really does. And it wasn't until I finished the story that I realized that oxen was kind of like a mental primer as for the motif of sacrifice that's running through the second part, which is then fulfilled by Zareth sacrificing the entire caravan of merfolk in order to save him and Akiri, because just like with the oxen was dying regardless. It was going to die at some point. Either they killed it or it was going to suffer. And the same kind of thing was going on with the caravan of merfolk, where if they didn't sacrifice the caravan of merfolk, they were all going to die anyway. So they kind of had to, in order to allow Akiri and Zareth to go on. And I love that. That looping of themes is a very good touch here. Another example of this is the moments where they do flashbacks, because instead of them being separate from what's happening, they're actually jutting into and cutting into the sentences that are going through these paragraphs. For example, I believe the first time it's done, it's when Akiri's throwing one of her hooks, and she goes, "A moment at her next anchor to catch her breath, to unhook her radial and sight her next point, then to throw, and then it cuts off. And her line caught the anchor," Akiri grinned. "Her first, good," the singer captain nodded. "Her voice a gravel-tint glow. See it set? Give it a pull to be sure. Put all of your weight on it, core. You need to trust the line will hold you up." Then it cuts back and climb once more. So the previous sentence without the flashback would have read, "A moment at her next anchor to catch her breath, to unhook her radial and sight her next point, then to throw and climb once more." And these, I believe, are meant to show just how in these moments the characters are just being taken back to their past. Not necessarily traumatic past, because this is a happy moment for Akiri, but it reminds her of the lesson she learned to trust the line as she's flying through the air. It's used traumatically in Zareth's case when he's fighting Verazol, and he goes, "Raise your arm and strike down a world. Sure, there were some that could do that." Cuts off. "A night of fever and ash dust lit only by fire and the chromatic explosions high above, each blast like a dawn in a heartbeat." But not Zareth. And even with all of her grace and skill, not Akiri. Here, Zareth is looking up at Verazol, this gigantic monstrosity that he knows he can't beat, and it takes him right back to the battle with the Eldrazi, where he couldn't. There was no way that he was going to beat the Eldrazi. And him and Akiri simply survived. And that is another point of the mimicking the present with the past. The battle with the Eldrazi, where Zareth and Akiri kind of got close together in order to battle them, ended the same way this story ends. On a much smaller scale, at least. Where it's just them, the only survivors, after a battle with this gigantic world-size monstrosity. Now, I want us to just pedal back a little bit to the beginning, and it's how I want to touch upon how Miguel Lopez deals with characterization. Indirect characterization, mainly. And I love these specific excerpts where you could tell a lot of the character from just minor sentences. For example, in the opening scene, they're prepping the caravan for the final descent into the Magosi steppes. And Akiri is repeatedly, and I mean repeatedly, unless I misread it, she repeatedly checks all of the straps, harnesses, and binds for the oxen. And I believe this is telling the reader how, under like her cool exterior, there is a level of worry and a level of fear that she feels doing this. Because why else would you need to repeatedly check these things over and over again and reassure people over and over again? There is a tension that you get from reading that. From reading all these repetitive, just they're doing this and they're doing this and they're checking this. She's worried. And Zareth is characterized by expressing this fear and worry mainly through laughter and joking around. Like he just jokes that, hey look, if you fall, just aim for the water. That's such a quirky thing that it seems childish at first, but then you realize it's a legitimate way that people cope with the traumatic experiences they have and the fear that they feel. Then he asks, any idea what they're carrying, referring to the boxes in the caravan? And Akiri said, do you want me to guess, or do you want to tell me? Right there, with just that one sentence, we reaffirm that Zareth is the kind of person that already looked in these boxes and already took some things. He took some blueberries, I believe. And Akiri just knew that. It didn't need to be said that he stole things from the caravan. It didn't need to be said that he snuck around. It's just in that sentence, we knew what Zareth did, and we knew the kind of person that Zareth is. In the following paragraph, Akiri then feels a disappointment in Zareth for the kind of person that he's become after he left the Seagate. That's really just a good touching moment between friends, because again, they haven't really seen each other in years. I believe, if I'm following the timeline correctly from part 1, they've only been back together as friends for, I believe, a couple days, maybe 5, 6 days, depending how long they planned, how long they've been traveling with this caravan. It is after this exchange where they feel the royal again, the Zendikar royal, like a small earthquake shaking the ground. And Akiri reaffirms everybody. They're like, no, it's fine, the royal just passes, it passed, and we can move on. Zareth is worried and concerned about it, because it is kind of said afterwards that the royal is more of a force of nature that warns for future impending doom. So right there, it's a little direct and a little on the nose, and I didn't like that, but I don't think there was a better way of explaining what the royal was in this context like that. But Zareth is now really worried, and it's not said that he's worried, it is stated, his grip on his knives went white, though otherwise he remained composed, calm, and cool. And right there, the alliteration was nice, but it shows that Zareth feels anxious, like he's gripping this to the point where his knuckles are white, but he's still keeping that cool exterior of the joking fellow trying to get through this, because he knows he has to. That's just how he copes and how he's going to deal with this pet. What's going to happen? They both know that something is going to happen. Speaking of the royal, another thing that I noticed as I'm reading this, it is the concept that the royal has become such an integrated part of Zendikar to Akiri and Zareth, and maybe to a lot of people in Zendikar, where they don't really think of the royal as this thing that's evil. They think of it as a warning sign of Zendikar, as a sign that the plane is in danger or that it's corrupted. And that's really interesting in the grand scheme of the main story, where the thing that Nahiri's trying to do is to get rid of the royal. But here they show Akiri, that's gonna fuck me up too. Akiri sees this as just a warning sign of Zendikar. Zareth accepts it as a warning sign of Zendikar. And then when they're fighting Verazol, it's stated that he is like his own plane, like he is part of Zendikar. He isn't just a monstrosity that's corrupted. He is a product of Zendikar and a product of the royal incarnate. And after they get really up close to him and they see his eyes, they see a figment, kind of an echo of the corruption of the Eldrazi within Verazol. And Zareth notes how some of the merfolk actually worshipped Verazol as a god. And again, that goes back and mimics how some of the merfolk worshipped the Eldrazi as gods. And Verazol was corrupted by the Eldrazi along with the rest of the plane. And I believe it serves a purpose as if to prime the reader that this corruption of the Eldrazi, it's become so interwoven with the fabric of Zendikar that it's not really going to be easy to tear away without tearing away part of what makes Zendikar what it is. And I'm going to touch more upon that when I focus on where I think the story is going to go on from here. Now, my absolute favorite part of this entire story, and I think it's like the crowning jewel of Miguel Lopez's writing so far, and it's what I've noticed, is the way he uses perspective, point of view, and pacing in this specific piece. Because like I mentioned before, at some point along the line, during the battle with, I keep forgetting his name, it's like the fifth take, Verazol the Scourge of Amara, that's as he is. The perspective shift to only focusing on Akiri and what she sees, and it switches to Zareth and what he does and what he sees, and it switches back to Akiri, and finally switches back to Zareth, and then finally it ends with Akiri once more. And it took me a little bit of like seeing this on paper to realize this. The parts, the individual segments of the story that are divided by these little dividing lines, if you're reading it online, actually get shorter and shorter as the battle keeps going. It's not really much of a battle, it's more of a climb than a battle, but anyway. They get shorter. But they take place during roughly around the same amount of time. Like the opening scene with Kiri takes about as much time as the rest of this first part. It's a matter of moments, like a minute at most of actually doing, like a minute and a half of her climbing on Verazol, climbing up to him, and then Zareth moving to the merfolk and kind of pushing out of their way. But Akiri's first part takes like a whole 2.5 pages to get through. And Zareth, only like about a page and a half, maybe even a page depending on your font size. And a lot of Akiri's part is just her trying to understand Verazol's size. Like she goes, how would Akiri even begin to describe the monster that lurked behind the mist? How could she encompass its great bulk in a thought? The number of teeth that lined its maw, it was far too large, and said she saw only moments of the coiling beast, and knew it to be a kind of serpent, one as large as the mighty river it hid. And then it continues, Is this what the royal had warned them of this humid morning, or was this thing, this colossal serpent, whose body stretched hundreds of feet up from the same unseen pool at the Magosi's base, the royal itself in terrible physical form? And it gives this serpent kind of an eldritch vibe where you can't actually comprehend or see all of it. There's actually, I don't believe, any scene in this entire piece where its entirety isn't captured. You only see a head, or a second head, or a part of its wing, or part of its maw. You are never, as the reader, given more than what Zareth and Akiri can see. And that is a really, really good user perspective and point of view, which I'm gonna go on a little bit later right after this. But here, it's an instant. We get like a page, and it's just an instant moment to Akiri, and it's wonderfully written where you can actually, you feel what she feels. You actually see her struggling through every push, every pull, every flashback that she's taken from, every hook that she tries to anchor on. But it's only like a couple minutes, like a minute at most, and it stretches for 2.5 pages. And it's wonderful. You see her struggling to snap it off with the knife. She tries to fight it the best she can. And that knife, the knife that she stabs Verizal with and breaks, is a really good, I want to say like a narrative device to display her approach at this, differentiating from the blue approach, the Demir approach of Zareth, his blue-black orientation. Because when Zareth tries to use a knife, he doesn't. He just immediately, he holds them because he has to, but he understands that they are not going to do anything. He accepts that reality right away because he understands what Verizal is. He has the knowledge of it being this gigantic mythical beast that he's not even attempting to defeat. He just wants to survive it with Akiri, and that's kind of his only focus in all this. And it's where I want to lead off to my favorite use in this. There's a term in literature called dramatic irony, where it's a type of irony where the reader knows things or understands things that the characters don't. It's kind of like if you're watching a mystery drama and you know who the murderer is, but the characters are trying to figure it out. Some mystery dramas work better off when the viewer doesn't know who the murderer is, but a lot of other shows, usually action movies or romantic comedies, you know what's going on. You understand both sides. Like in a rom-com, when there's a misunderstanding, you know what's happening. So you're just trying to wait till the characters figure out what's going on. That's mainly how dramatic irony is used. There is no dramatic irony in this entire piece. None at all. Like, you know nothing. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's coming up. You don't even know that Verizal has a second head until Akiri does. Akiri's struggling this whole time, thinking that her attacks are doing nothing, the Serpent's not even noticing what she's doing, and you believe her because as a reader, that's what you understand. He hasn't done anything. And then it's suddenly faced with a fake out that there's a second head, and now that the second head is there, you are now as shocked as Akiri is, and that is so good, and I love that. It's such a good writing because taking the dramatic irony away puts your reader on their toes, because now they don't even know. It adds tension and suspense to this already really tense narrative that they're going with. And it's used again when you go to Zareth's piece, because you see at the end of Akiri's part, she falls. Then you cut to Zareth hearing her scream. You have no idea what's happening to Akiri while Zareth is just trying to scramble and figure out what he's trying to do. And as he's coming up with this plan to sacrifice the merfolk, you, the reader, I didn't catch it. I didn't know he was going to sacrifice the merfolk. I figured he was going to sacrifice the ox. I understood his plan is using the ox to distract the serpent because it already ate an ox. It's probably going to want to eat another one. But then, when I see the serpent look up to Zareth and the merfolk, I believed that plan had gone wrong. That, oh shit, something's going to happen. And no, that was the plan. Zareth knew that they were going to kill him. That he was going to kill the merfolk. And it didn't hit me until I didn't see, but like, I read that Zareth jumped across the maw of Verizal without a worry. He just jumped straight through. He knew it was going to happen. He just wanted to avoid it and get out of there. And he falls with no harness, no line, and believes that Akiri will catch him. But we don't know that. We just see him fall. It isn't until Akiri cuts back into her perspective and we see her go in and save Zareth that it makes sense. And that use of, well, I guess not use of dramatic irony is a wonderful piece of this entire narrative, and I enjoy that. More short stories should do that. That'd be really, really great. The main story is attempting to use that with the lithoform orb MacGuffin thing they got going on, but I don't really care enough about it to really deep into it. It can do whatever it wants. At this one, it can do anything. It has shaken an entire skyclave. It has disintegrated something. It has made a weird ooze pop out. It's a spoiler if you haven't read part 2, but you should probably read part 2 at this point. Yeah, I don't care about that. This is really, really good use or misuse of dramatic irony. So finally, on to the last piece, and the last scene where it's really cutting when you really visualize what's happening. They're like at the bottom of this thing. The roaring waves are crashing so hard that Akiri can't even hear Zareth talking next to him unless he's literally shouting in her ear. And you just see Zareth break down sobbing because he didn't have a choice. He had to sacrifice the merfolk. His people really, And he didn't have a choice. He knew what he had to do. And Akiri understands that it wasn't a good choice. It wasn't even the right choice. It was just the only choice they had. Either he did that or they were all going to die regardless. And it's so good. It's powerful. And it's a stark reminder of where they are. And I think this side story serves the purpose of priming the reader into that in Zendikar there really isn't going to be a solution that everyone's going to be okay with. There isn't going to be a right solution. There's simply going to be a solution that hurts the less amount of people, I guess, is going to be the way this is going to go. So that makes me interested as to how the main story is going to finish. This interested me more on the ending of the main story than anything else, really. I also forgot to note that the caravan dude said that they should go check out this place, and even Akira wants to check out this place down in Coralhelm, and they just avoid it because they're all dead. And that's how it ended. The final line isn't about them, it's about them avoiding Coralhelm, because they had already promised that they were going to go check out one of these stands over there. Good story. Good. 9 out of 10. 8 out of 10 so far. I haven't rated any of these, but I'm rating this one 8, 9 out of 10. This is such a good part, and I really hope that Miguel Lopez is writing the rest of the side stories, and if he's not, I hope the next cycle around, they give him a much bigger part of the story, like if they make him write the main story, because this is fucking great. He tied up all the loose ends. Such wonderful characterization, a wonderful amount of it's just good writing in general. I'm sorry for the audio hiccup, I can't really fix it. But it's good, and I suggest you read it, and I can't wait to see what Miguel Lopez is going to do, and I'm actually on my free time. I'm going to go look him up and see what else he's written, because I might actually check it out because of this. Anyway, that's the review. I went a little bit past the 20-minute mark, but that's mainly because of housekeeping, so I'll see you all around, and let's hope that the story on Wednesday isn't complete garbage anymore. Bye.